Have you ever seen a photograph on the internet of an old woman draped in a headscarf, standing amidst a vast field with a dog by her side? The story behind this seemingly ordinary picture is nothing short of haunting. Allow me to share with you the spine-chilling tale that lies behind it. Sometime in the 1900s, there was a man by the name of Charlie Noonan who spent his days journeying across the southern and southwestern regions of the United States. He had an insatiable passion for folklore and tales of the supernatural. He made it a point to converse with locals about their legends and beliefs, carefully cataloging them along the way. Whenever he stumbled upon something that caught his eye, a curious object or an unusual sight, he would capture it with his camera. His travels were marked with wonder and curiosity as he sought to uncover the mysteries of the land he traversed. Charlie, an adventurer at heart, one day embarked on a journey to Oklahoma to uncover the local legends of the land. Upon arriving at his destination, he set out to explore the area and gather new stories. While wandering around the northwest region of Oklahoma, he stumbled upon a farm and couldn't resist the urge to inquire about the hair-raising legends surrounding the area. Eager to learn more, he began to ask around to discover the mystical tales that lay hidden within the land. As he was conversing with some locals, he came across a farmer who shared a fabled tale about the farm surrounding the area. The rural dweller spoke of an eerie legend he believed to be true. He narrated a curious account of a mysterious old woman who resided in a solitary estate in the Panhandle, known for always concealing her face behind a scarf. The farmer claimed that she was not human, but something else entirely. The woman was always accompanied by a colossal, powerful gray canine that always remained by her side. Folks in the area had frequently spotted the mysterious woman wandering around the vast fields and endless plains, and even venturing into the remote Panhandle. She maintained an elusive presence, never engaging directly with anyone who crossed her. However, whispers occasionally emanated from her lips as she strolled alongside her dog. I think the dog was there for her protection, but for those who believed her to be an entirely different entity than a human, the dog was seen as nothing more than a loyal companion. She was an enigma to the people who lived there. Her aura was cloaked in a haunting darkness that made people uneasy. Those who had the misfortune of encountering her claimed that her piercing eyes glowed with an unnerving intensity that sent chills down their spine. The entire land she resided in was shrouded in an ominous atmosphere that made one feel on edge. According to that farmer, some believed she was a demon, while others whispered that she was a witch. No one dared to approach her, let alone thought of harming her. As soon as Charlie heard the intriguing story, he felt a strong urge to seek out the mysterious woman described in the farmer's tale. He was captivated by the legend and determined to uncover the truth behind it. Without delay, he picked up his camera and stepped out of the farmhouse door, heading straight for the Oklahoma Panhandle. With a glint of excitement in his eyes, he embarked on a journey to find the elusive woman, hoping to capture her image on camera if luck was on his side. Many years had passed since Charlie embarked on his quest to find her, and he had not been seen or heard from since that fateful day. But one day, as a wandering drifter traversed the vast field, he stumbled upon an intriguing discovery, an abandoned device lying amidst the tall grass. It was weathered and worn, but still intact, and the drifter saw the potential to make a few dollars by selling it. He took the device to a nearby pawnbroker and sold it to him. But little did he know the truth behind what he had found. Upon examining the vintage camera, the Tulsa pawnbroker's eyes fell upon the name Noonan engraved on its surface, who remembered reading about Charlie's disappearance in the papers. An impulsive took hold of him, and he felt compelled to reunite the camera with its rightful owner. With dogged determination, he embarked upon a quest to find the person to whom this device had once belonged. After a long and arduous search, he finally contacted Ellie Noonan, Charlie's wife, a woman who had been waiting for her husband's return. Ellie had been searching for her husband ever since he disappeared, but was only met with dead ends. She had begun to lose hope as the years passed without a single clue about where Charlie could be. That was why the pawnbroker's unexpected visit filled her with a glimmer of hope as he handed the camera back to her, reuniting her with a piece of her husband's past. As soon as she acquired the camera, she eagerly had the only photograph on the roll developed, hoping to find a clue of her husband's whereabouts, only to meet disappointment and an unknown horror. The lone image depicted an elderly woman donning a scarf and standing alongside a dog. The woman's eyes seemed to emit an eerie glow, conveying something horrifying. Despite extensive searches, Charlie Noonan's disappearance remained a mystery, and over time, his story became an urban legend. The mystery surrounding the ominous picture of the woman has left many wondering what truly happened that day. Some speculate that it is just an intriguing urban myth, while others believe that there may be some truth to the story. I can't help but wonder if the woman was really a demon or a witch with mysterious powers. If not, then what do you think really happened to Charlie? Did he simply vanish without a trace after capturing that eerie image? Or is there a darker, more sinister explanation behind the mystery yet to be uncovered?
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
My wife's brother. The summer of 2012 had just begun, and I was looking forward to a relaxing vacation at home with my family. However, little did I know that my wife had other plans. One day while I was lounging on my new recliner and watching a football game, I heard my wife clearing her throat. It was a sound I had grown accustomed to over the years, but this time it was different. There was a certain urgency to it that made me sit up and take notice. I turned my head towards her and saw that she was looking at me with a solemn expression on her face. I hesitated for a moment, knowing that whatever she needed was going to take away my peace, for she only made that peculiar expression when something serious was on her mind. She then proceeded to tell me that her family had planned an exciting cruise trip. Before I could even express my thoughts on the matter, she broke the news that she had already discussed it with my family, and they had all agreed to go. I was instantly taken aback, feeling a bit annoyed that she had made such a big decision without consulting me first. It wasn't the first time she had done something like this, and it left me feeling like our relationship was unbalanced. I couldn't help but feel like my opinion didn't matter to her as much as her own desires and the wishes of her family. Despite my initial frustration, I decided to let it go. Since I didn't want to go, I tried to convince her to take the kids with her, but she was adamant I'd go with them. I knew what the outcome was going to be, but it was still worth a try. I reluctantly agreed, knowing that it was my responsibility as a father and a husband. That is how I went on a cruise trip with my wife's family in mind. However, there was one thing that was bothering me. A few members of Natasha's family, with whom I didn't see eye to eye, I was worried that their presence might spoil the mood and the trip could go in the opposite direction of fun. But since they were part of the family package, we had to take them along. On the first day of the trip, we were having a great time exploring the ship and enjoying the amenities. The food was excellent, the weather was perfect, and everyone seemed to be getting along well. But then, out of nowhere, Natasha's brother Sam suggested that we play a challenging game. Now, let me tell you why I referred to him as obnoxious. It wasn't because he was loud or aggressive, but because he had a habit of not taking no for an answer once he had made up his mind. Natasha was having seasickness, so she passed, and I didn't want to play any of his weird games. At first it was fun, but soon enough, things started to get intense when Sam's challenges started getting more complicated. We watched as the twisted games started, and they would give each other a weird yet tricky challenge to overcome. There was this adjacent balcony bank in a row, and due to a challenge, Sam tried to climb to it. It wasn't like someone else told him to do that. He gave that challenge to himself. It looked daunting, but Sam was up for the challenge. The rest of us watched anxiously as he attempted to scale the wall. The sound of his hands and feet scrambling against the rough surface echoed through the balcony. While we were all amazed by his determination, we couldn't help but worry that he might fall. As I stood on the balcony, watching Sam attempt to climb, the sound of crashing waves filled the air. The moon was hidden behind clouds, making it difficult to see the waves, but their force was evident in the way the water sprayed up the side of the building. Suddenly, a huge wave hit, sending water rushing up to the balcony level. Sam's foot slipped on the wet surface and he lost his grip, tumbling over the balcony railing and into the dark, choppy water below. Panic erupted among the group as we scrambled to search for him, shouting his name and scanning the water with our flashlights. The sound of crashing waves and the fear of not finding him weighed heavy on our hearts as we desperately hoped for a glimpse of him in the darkness. Without wasting any time, we immediately dialed the emergency services and reported the incident. The operator on the other end of the line was calm and composed and assured us that help was on the way. After what seemed like an eternity, a search party of experienced divers was dispatched to the location. They were well equipped with advanced diving gear, including underwater cameras, sonar systems, and diving suits. Upon arriving at the scene, they conducted a thorough assessment of the area, strategizing the best course of action to take. The divers then began their search, descending into the depths of the ocean with great care and precision. They meticulously combed the area, thoroughly scanning every nook and cranny until they finally found Sam. He was then quickly brought to the surface in a critical condition, where he was immediately taken to the hospital for medical attention. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it and died after a few hours of being in the emergency room. We were devastated by the news, and my wife, who loved her brother dearly, couldn't take it very well and passed out almost immediately. Even after waking up, she was panicking, and I tried my best to calm her down. She cried for days, and sometimes it would be hard for me to handle her grief. Her brother's death changed her. She stopped visiting her family entirely. I know I said I didn't like her family all that much, but it was heartbreaking to see my wife in such a state. It's been 10 years since that incident. My wife has developed severe PTSD and is still unable to go on a cruise.
About 8 years ago now, me and my dad and a few of my cousins were fishing down in southern Maryland one summer. We were out of the particular spot where there are these things called target ships. These are old decommissioned Navy ships that have been mounted on top of concrete pillars so they can float no matter how much the Navy tests munitions on them. They get shot at by all kinds of vehicles with all kinds of bullets, bombs, and missiles. But anyway, we're all on my dad's Grady White fishing for croaker and flounder right near these target ships. If they're actually being used for military exercises, you can't even get near them. So since there's no one out there to wave us away, we were out near the target ships with about 20 other boats in the water. But then, sure enough, about an hour and some guy from the Coast Guard sails up to us. They're on a big old CG boat with about 15 trainees on board, and the officer in command asks a favor from my dad. He wants to know if he can practice a little inspection drill with a few of his trainees. Being the good guy he is, my dad gives them permission, then renders them coming on board. I feel my rod getting all heavy all of a sudden. I call it out, and the Coast Guard officer stops his inspection and says, "Go ahead, son, reel it up. let's see what you got. So I reel and reel, and it's really obvious how heavy whatever I've caught is, so naturally we're all getting mad excited. Then, to all of our absolute horror, I pull the thing from the water, and we all see that it is an unexploded bomb. It was a cylindrical diamond shape with neon green stabilizers, about 12 to 14 inches long and 4 inches in diameter at its thickest part. Well, now the officer, the trainee, and the entire boat of Coast Guard has just witnessed what I pulled out of the water. And I'm not kidding when I say that. I watched the color drain from all their faces. They went from pink, unhealthy, to skeletal white. And the time it took to say the trainee on our boat literally leaves to his boat, and they all haul it away with their sirens on. This leaves a very rattled Coast Guard officer on our boat, who promptly orders me to not move a single muscle. The Coast Guard gets on our VHF and tells all the boats in the area to leave the target ships. And I'm telling you, you ain't never seen fishing boats move so fast. After about 20 minutes of me sitting there with this bomb on my line, the area is finally cleared away. The officer orders my father to put his boat and drive to achieve a good bit of speed, and then don't stop. So my dad goes as he's ordered, puts the boat in gear, and seconds, we're rolling about 15 to 20 knots away from the ship. The absurd brings out a knife, cuts my line, and orders my dad to just throttle the boat and get away as fast as you can. Needless to say, it did not detonate when it hit the bottom of the bay. We took the officer, who was pretty clearly shaken, back to his ship. I know it's hard to believe the story without proof, but in the situation, we didn't have time to get a picture of it. We tried, but the Coast Guard officer was adamant about us getting out of there as quickly as possible. But take my word for it, it's easily the scariest thing I've ever had happen to me during a fishing trip.
Back when I was pursuing my PhD in zoology at the UL Lafayette, I chose to write my thesis on the life cycle of biology of the alligator snapping turtle. This meant I spent an awful lot of time out at the Atchafalaya National Wildlife Refuge, a 1.5 million acre area of hardwood swamps, lakes, and bayous about 30 miles west of Baton Rouge. It's a truly beautiful and awe-inspiring place, but it's wild. One of those areas out in the country that has barely been conquered by humanity. And coming from Chicago, I'd never seen anything quite like it. But as much as I had come to love Atchafalaya, I had one of the worst experiences of my entire life whilst lost in the swamps there. An incident so intensely terrifying that I had to put my studies on pause for a matter of months in order to recover. I've decided to write down what I went through as a form of cognitive behavioral therapy in the hopes that it will help me deal with some of the unresolved traumas that followed me out of the swamps. Whether or not it will actually help, I can't tell just yet, but I sincerely hope it does, as frankly, I've been unable to be completely happy or content in myself since it happened. So without further ado, this is my story. It all started the morning my research partner and I were supposed to drive out to Atchafalaya for a long day of study and observation. The weather had been absolutely abominable over the previous few weeks, and we picked a time during what appeared to be a brief break in the rainy season. It might be the only period for weeks where it would be feasible to undertake such a research trip, but in the morning we were due to depart, I awoke to a text message saying he was feeling severely under the weather. He apologized, but told me that he wouldn't be able to accompany me. I was disappointed in the extreme, but like I said, the following few days looked like they would be the only time I'd be able to get a sizable chunk of research completed. So as foolish as it was, I loaded up my gear into my car and drove out into the swamps, alone. I drove out to the small town of Plaquemine, just on the edge of Atchafalaya, parking up near a small mom-and-pop joint to get some griots and grits before my hike into the swamps. I was in a pretty bad mood marching in there alone, and I had to carry a little extra equipment since I couldn't spread the load with my research partner. This made the walk out to my preferred observation spot much more tiring than usual. I mean, it's crazy how just a little extra weight can make a long hike like that seem harder. But anyway, I'm on my way out to a place called Upper Flat, a big stretch of water near Little Tensaw Bayou, when all of a sudden, I started realizing that I don't recognize any of the terrain. This was weird, as I'd made this journey like at least 50 times before, too many to really keep track of, but I figured I've only strayed just a little off course and I could find my way back onto my regular trail in no time. It was just a case of finding out which direction I'd move off in and making the appropriate course correction. Only when I get my compass out, I see the little needle spinning around wildly, like whirling around in a circle like it was being propelled by something. I give it a little tap, shaking it up, but it carries on doing exactly the same thing. It's not like it was a cheap compass either. It was a Suunto KB14, and there's some of the best compasses on the market. That one in particular set me back almost $200, so I fall back on the compass on my iPhone, which is even less reliable but works off a GPS as opposed to the Earth's natural magnetic forces. But again, not only does it refuse to calibrate, but I realize I have absolutely no bars on my phone either. That was definitely not normal. The cell reception isn't the best out there, but I always get something, even if it's just a single bar to send texts. I'm a little worried by that point, as I've basically got no method of reaching the outside world if something goes wrong. But it's either push on and get my day's research done, or walk back the way I came and face messing up my entire thesis. And I don't even know if the way I came will even take me back to Plaquemine by that point. So I foolishly decide it would be better to push on as opposed to turn back, one of the single biggest mistakes of my life. So I'm walking for like another hour or so, hopelessly lost in a place I somehow barely recognize, when I begin to smell smoke coming through the trees. I figured it's some campers or hunters out there, which would be highly unusual for the wet season, but at least they'd be able to point me back in the direction of Upper Flat. I follow my nose as the smoky smell gets more and more intense, until I start to see the smoke itself wafting through the trees. That's also about the time I begin to hear the slow, rhythmic sounds of a banjo being plucked, just out of sight. It's not some jolly Cajun tune either. The sounds are discordant, ominous even, and the hairs on the back of my neck begin to stand on end as I finally begin to see this little wooden shack coming into view. I can see the campfire by that point, and the sounds of the banjo are floating out of a small window in the shack. I'm nervous, but I speak up anyway, calling out hello and asking if anyone is home, even though I knew well that there is. I was just trying to be polite, you know. This angry-looking face appears in the window in an instant, a face I'll never forget. This guy's skin looked like leather, all wrinkled and cracked, while the darkest eyes I'd ever seen started around from sunken eye sockets. He had a beard and mustache, but it was all dark, ratty, patchy hair that made him look more like a kind of vermin than a man. There was some rustling from inside before the guy stumbled out from the shack's door, staring at me from the wooden steps. I apologized for my intrusion, then asked him if he knew which direction I could find Upper Flat. He didn't say a word at first, just carried on staring at me like I was somewhere I didn't belong, which I suppose was exactly the case. I then took to reassuring him that I didn't want to take up any of his time, that I was a little lost and all I wanted was to find my way back towards Little Tensaw. Petit Tensaw? He replied, in a drawl of Cajun French. Oui. Parlez-vous anglais? I had picked up a little French since moving to Louisiana for school, but I'm not about to pretend it was any good. The man just shook his head and then said something that sounded like a question that included the word traiteur. For those of you that don't know, in Louisiana, a traiteur is what they call someone who practices so-called faith healing, and whose primary method of treatment involves what's known on as kind of a laying on of hands, so to speak. An important part of Creole and Cajun folk religion, the traiteur combines Catholic prayer, medicinal remedies, and occasionally voodoo rituals. or at least I thought they did. I genuinely didn't think that there were any traiteurs left, assuming the practice had long died out, yet apparently not. Traiteur cum, voodoo? Non? I asked with a chuckle in my terrible French, trying to be as disarming as possible as to not irritate the man any further. He didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He just got mad. Really, really mad. He started growling things in French I didn't understand, pointing at me accusatorily as he seemed to get angrier and angrier. I started to back off slowly at that point, hands raised in the air as if to say, I don't want any trouble. But somehow that just makes him even more irate. And then he's sort of apoplectic with rage as he pulls this huge gator jawbone knife from behind his back and starts pointing it directly at me. A knife on its own would have been intimidating enough, but seeing the blunted alligator teeth that made up the handle, Jesus, that's just about scared the life out of me. I thought once I was out of there I'd be okay, but as I'm walking back through the forest, pretty shaken up, he starts screaming in French and whistling. Only when I look over my shoulder just to make sure he's not about to give chase, I notice something that makes my blood run cold. He's not screaming at my back. He's not whistling at me either. He's screaming and whistling into the forest. It didn't quite hit me at first. I just peered over the back of my shoulder wondering what he was doing, but then I realized he was calling others, telling them there was an intruder or whatever. I tried to move as quickly as I could without running. Don't get me wrong, I was absolutely terrified, but the bayou is not a place to go blindly sprinting among the greenery. Aside from gators and occasional cougar sightings, Louisiana is home to the cottonmouth snake. Although it's not outright deadly, their venom contains an anticoagulant, meaning the wound won't clot. Cottonmouth bites have been known to be fatal and without treatment, certainly require amputation. So, I'm sort of jogging and bounding my way from the shack as fast as I can, keeping my eyes on the ground so I don't get myself bitten. I go for about 20 minutes or so until I'm happy I'm far enough away from that angry Cajun to resume my walking pace. I felt exhaustion setting in at that point too. I'm sweating through my clothes and I am completely and utterly lost. My compass and phone still aren't working at all, and the further I walk, the more I'm panicking that I'm not going to be able to get out of the swamps by sundown, in which case I would be really screwed. But just as I'm starting to feel relatively safe, I hear something like a twig snapping behind me, before I get this horrible feeling in my gut like someone is actually following me. I do a quick 360, making sure I can't see anyone, which I don't. The bayou seemed as still and quiet as ever, yet the feeling didn't abate. I'm still convinced that someone is out there just beyond my vision, watching me with unseen eyes. I start moving more quickly again, bounding through the trees until I'm almost certain I can hear the sounds of a car driving in the distance. I was close to road, I was sure of it. But right as I start to move off in the direction of the sound, someone steps out from a tree just to the side of me. They were dressed in all black, bare-chested with red-brown skin that was riddled with strange-looking tattoos. Over their face was a mask that looked an awful lot like the front section of a human skull, and in their hand was a huge black blade of some kind. To this day, I have never seen anything as completely and utterly terrifying as whoever or whatever walked out from behind that tree. Whether or not they intended to do me harm or just scare me out of the area, I can't really say for certain. But I sure didn't want to wait to find out. I forgot about the cottonmouths and just ran as fast as I could, sprinting through the trees as I heard the guy following me. It was horrifying. I could hear him panting just a few meters behind me, the whole way until I burst through this thick patch of bushes and onto the highway behind it. I ran out in front of a car which almost smashed into me, honking its horn with the driver going crazy. I ran around to the guy's driver's window and begged him to let me in. At first, he told me to screw off and almost drove off on me. But I begged the guy. I really begged. And I don't know if it was how haggard I looked or if it was the genuine terror in my voice, but eventually he agreed to let me in. I told him what went back down in that bayou, and I asked him if he'd ever seen or heard anything like that. He told me no. but also mentioned that he knew way better than to be walking around the bayou on his own like that, and that I was an idiot for doing it. He was kind enough to drive me back over to Plaquemine to where my car was parked, and I thanked him profusely for potentially saving my life. I offered him some gas money, but he told me no, that there was no way he was about to take money off of me for just doing the right thing. That's something I never forgot about Louisiana, just how kind and generous people could be. How the whole thing about Southern hospitality was very, very true. But I've also never forgotten about that man in the bone mask. The man who haunted my nightmares for months after, and almost ruined my whole time at college since, like I said, I had to put my studies on pause just to get over what I'd seen out there. So please, don't ever go walking into the bayous of Louisiana alone, because there are people out there that are seriously averse to the intrusion of outsiders.